Hello and good evening. Welcome to our only live stream this year so far. Probably the only one by the end of it as well. Um, Welcome. So this is our Patreon development stream for December 2022. And yeah, we actually didn't plan to develop something this month, but yeah, things happen. So, what we have proposed is basically a version of the existing transform modifier, but with handles. So, if we look at our standard cow here, it has a db&w transform modifier attached to it. Um, this is something that you have already. And what we have done is added the ability to change those transforms using handles. And the only other main tool where we've used handles so far was Spline Toolkit, and we kind of reused some of those handles, but it actually looked more like we had to basically develop a whole new handle system from scratch, or gizmos as they're called in Lightwave. So the interesting thing about it, about the whole system of gizmos in Lightwave, is that it's super primitive. You have to draw everything yourself. You have to compute your own intersections, um, deal with what happens if the user clicks on it, and so on. But yeah, this one is actually working quite nicely so far. I've only implemented the translation gizmos, and yeah, the thing that I've just bug fixed like literally a minute ago is, as you can see, things get super cluttered because you have the original transform gizmos that Lightwave has, and I can't really turn them off. So you will have these kind of overlaid on the actual gizmo for the db&w transform um, deformer. And to make things a little easier, and that's something I just added, you can actually toggle these on and off. So this is the native Lightwave gizmos, and if I just want to use the transform deformer but only use it for translation, I can just enable the translation handles. And as you can see, the handles here give you the normal arrows, and they even highlight the color changes. And you also have planar handles, which allow you to move along a specific plane, which is something that Lightwave actually doesn't have natively. All right, so these handles work so far. The ones that I'm only drawing so far is the rotation handles. They're a little bit trickier, um, mainly because in this case I also have to compute the intersection of whatever the location of the mouse cursor is with basically a ring around those three circles that I have there. And that is a bit trickier than just computing the intersection of the mouse cursor with what is essentially a big cylinder here. So yeah, that's something that's still to do. The same with scale. Scale should be fairly easy to implement, but yeah, I've left that for last. So a few nice things that it does is it does take the auto key setting into account. So if auto key is off and you go to a different frame, it won't actually do anything. I'll probably change that so it will do something if there aren't any keys at all. If you go to modified, then it will create keys for whatever axis you modified, and you can actually animate the whole thing using the handles. Actually, I'm not sure if modified works. It should. Yeah, it does. There we go. One thing I want to add for the buttons here is also an ability to directly go to the envelopes for the channels. So these are the ones that we've just edited. Actually, no, that's the cow. These are the ones. Ah, no, they are the right ones. Okay, never mind. Or are they? I might even have to check the channel groups if they're correct or not. Oh, and hello to everybody in the chat. Sorry, so busy thinking about what to say next. All right, so essentially that's the current state. Things you can do in the transform tool anyways is like select a weight map, and I've just created a simple weight map for the head of the cow. Let me just make it auto create all channels, and yeah, I can basically move that around any way I want to. There we go. And this is just a simple weight map without any interpolations or anything like that. And let me just see if there's anything on the cow itself. All right, there we go. Yeah. Unfortunately, the keys for the deform modifier don't show up in the dope sheet down here. While I do that for the spline toolkit, I'm not sure how feasible it is to do here, but that's because the SDK for the dope sheet is dope sheet is so arcane that the last time I asked the developer who actually developed it about it, he told me that yeah, he hadn't used it for 10 years and completely forgot about how to use it. So yeah, that's a key I didn't want to set. Now the only downside with using the handles like this is that the usual way of pressing return to create a motion key doesn't actually work, unfortunately. So yeah, um, that's the current state. The interesting thing is the way I developed the handles here. It's basically a complete handle system. I'm not sure if I over-engineered it, but I suspect that I'm going to need some kind of handles for this and for other projects in the future anyways. Um, so what's interesting about this from a technical point of view is that essentially, if we just look at the translation handles here, just, oh yeah, one more thing. If you, before I go into technical details, if you go to display handles and icons, you have the handle size. It actually takes those into account as well. So you can scale all the handles up or down any way you want to. Um, I've got them at 144, double the normal size, just so you can see it on stream as well. All right, um, technically what's interesting about these handles is that um, if you look at the whole transformation thing, we essentially have two types of handles and we have three of them. So we have the axis handle with the arrow on the end, and we have the planar handle, which are just filled rectangles. And each of those are available in three different colors in relation to the axis they relate to and three different directions. Internally, of course, there's just two types of handles. One is the axis, one is the planar handle. And what I did is basically in the source code, that's two different. There's one class called a gizmo, which is basically a generic interface for all kinds of gizmos, which would also include the rotational ones in the end, or the scaling ones. And even those buttons up here, because they're in the viewport, those are gizmos as well. Um, so there's this generic gizmo thing, and then I have an axis gizmo, and I have a planar gizmo, and I have a button gizmo, and I even have a button with text gizmo, which is this one up here, because there's another button gizmo where you can just put a bitmap and use that as a button. All right. The interesting thing is I also have one class called a compound gizmo. So that is a gizmo that may consist of multiple other gizmos. So if you look at our source code, if you look at the code from point of view of the transformation deformer, it's not dealing with an axis gizmo or with a planar gizmo. What it does is it deals with one translation gizmo, which is a compound of all these three sub-gizmos. And yeah, that makes things a lot easier in the end. Also, a lot of the handling of when to set keyframes on the parameter and stuff like that, all of that happens within the gizmos, so the plugin itself doesn't actually have to deal with that. Which in the future, if that whole code is being used, just makes using the gizmos a lot easier. Um, and yeah, from a technical point of view, what you have to do there in the Lightwave SDK is like super low level. You don't just have to draw them, but you also have to tell Lightwave how to intersect the gizmos and stuff like that. There's like um, the Gizmos SDK is very interesting because there's basically two ways to use it. One is using a super simple way. The downside of that is the active point where you can click is essentially just a circle, which in the case of a whole axis like this isn't sufficient because I want to be able to click on the top of it, I want to be able to click on the bottom of it, or click here. And granted, there is a certain gray area in the middle where I'm not sure which axis is going to be picked. Okay, it's this one. But at least along the length of each of those axes or within the area of that rectangle, you'll be able to pick the handles very confidently. And that wouldn't be possible if I used like the simple system, which is basically just a circle that you can click on, and anything outside the circle doesn't trigger as an event on the handles. So if you want to do it properly, you have to do it a bit more elaborately, but if you then turn that into reusable modules, then it's not too bad once you've sussed it out. So yeah, that is the current state, but the nice thing is you can still use this to create your keyframes. And I've even added stuff like if you look at the numeric values here, if I move it somewhere and release the left mouse button, bang, these values are actually going to update. Which oddly enough, because there's envelopes behind all the positions here, oddly enough, if you scrub through in Lightwave, even though these values are animated, they don't update here. That's something that, yeah, for some odd reason, Lightwave doesn't do. And it doesn't do it anywhere except for the position, the normal position values here. But anything that's like in a panel user interface, that's not how it works. But yeah, I at least want to make sure that if you edit something manually, you'll be able to get the new values here. And eventually we might even see numeric values next to the handle that you're currently moving, like you have here. Here we've got the positions. I'm actually not sure how Lightwave handles it if you leave the display, but yeah, I don't know. So that's something I'd like to add here as well. Also, there needs to be a way to change the pivot point. I'm not sure if there's going to be another handle for that and how that's going to look. So James Oblak asks, while keyframes are not shown on the timeline, can you shift and arrow key to jump between the keyframes? I wish. problem is that's something I was fighting with the spline toolkit as well. Is that the whole gizmos, which is basically attaching handles to a plugin, doesn't allow you to intercept keyboard shortcuts. So I can't just say, okay, well, while this tool is active, and maybe while the mouse cursor is over the viewport, I want to intercept all the keyboard shortcuts before Lightwave processes them, so that I can process them and filter something out. Um, Unfortunately, that doesn't work. However, however, what I could do, and that's not too big a deal really, is have like underneath this block of buttons, add another one that's basically next and previous keyframe. But that would be jumping to the next and previous keyframe for any of translation, rotation, scale. Also, I do want to add buttons so you can open the respective envelopes um, directly from the viewport, so you don't actually have to have the user interface of the plugin open, and can still edit the envelopes if you want to. So it's basically the equivalent of pressing this. Um, yeah, and also, as you can see, the user interface, the buttons will be visible in every viewport, regardless of how many you have open. The spline toolkit had like a function where it was only visible in the current viewport, but the current viewport can only be determined once you actually click into something, because there is no um, mouse is on top of something, is hovering on a viewport event that I can intercept. But it's something I might just add. So yeah, um, that's the current state of things. Um, as I said, I did just finish those buttons today. Um, yeah, I'll probably get all the handles and everything done by the end of the year. So expect like at least a beta version or so at the beginning of next year. I suppose most of you will be too busy celebrating until next year anyways. At least I hope so. So yeah, that's the current state. Are there any questions, except for James' wonderful question? And I'm afraid that quite often there's things that I would like to do and can't, just because of technical limitations. Also, Steve wanted to turn this into a pub quiz. Maybe he has a question for all of us. Um, yeah, it's a translate modeler tool for layout. The interesting thing is, because Kevin asks, he wants to know if this the best way to think of this is as a translate modeler tool for layout. You can think of it as a translate modeler tool in layout. The thing is, since we do have a modifier stack now, um, this allows you to insert translations to the mesh before or after specific modifiers. So that's something that might be super useful. Also, given that you can use weights, it's also a way to have like more control over deformations, or have like micro deformations on certain parts of your mesh that you might want to layer on top of the other um, deformations, or even things like a subdivision. I mean, that's one thing it allows you to do. For example, you can apply the deformation modifier after subdivision, which is something you can't do with a normal modeling tool. And you can also apply multiple deformers, so you can have each one of them as you can see here, it tells you the name of the weight map. So you can have multiple deformers that affect different weight maps. One thing we don't have is a way to actually select vertices or a weight map, but at least you can have multiple deformers that affect a different weight map each. Also, one thing that I'm going to still have to work on is what if there's multiple um, plugins that are actually, or multiple deformation and translation plugins that actually apply to the list, because I actually only want to draw the handles for the one that is currently selected, so this could get a bit messy. Yeah, I only have this one weight here at the moment. Um, but yeah, I suppose that's kind of makes sense. So it's almost like using a bone, except that it's a bit more manual than a bone, and there's no automatic dealing with overlapping weight maps and stuff like that, like bones do. Yes, more questions, please. But yeah, interestingly enough, the whole subject of handles itself is a big one. And yeah, one thing that I have to say is I would really like to see planar handles in Lightwave as well, because these are just so super useful to be able to move a mesh or translate something along two axes. And I just noticed that the handles in Lightwave are semi-transparent, while mine actually aren't. There you go. These are drawn slightly differently. But yeah. Yeah, it's true. You can disable those down here and then snap on specific axes. Um, but you know, it kind of defeats the purpose of actually having handles to click on. So yeah, if there aren't any more questions, I don't really have that much more to talk about, and not much more that we can show you. We wish we could. Um, but yeah, needless to say, we have been working on something for this year. Uh, it's not really ready to show yet. Hopefully, uh, within the first half of next year. Um, and yeah, that's all I'm going to say. But yeah, make sure to stay in touch on Discord, Facebook, all our social medias. Um, we'll certainly show you guys something as soon as we can, and you'll be one of the first to actually see it. Yeah, if there aren't any more questions, then still thank you for your support. Um, Thanks for joining us. It was really nice seeing all of you, and I have to admit, given all the development um, that we did in the past couple of months, it's nice to actually be in touch with you again. Yeah, it's the same in Germany, John. John says that he's on food duty and they have the Xmas dinner on Christmas Eve. Same in Germany. Well, depends on the tradition, but we also hand out presents on the 24th normally, not on the 25th. There's no Boxing Day in Germany, for example. Kevin asks if Patreon is back full swing. No, no. Um, while I'm really enjoying this because I actually love interacting with you guys as well, and having all that feedback, um, that was a bit of a mishap. But yeah, exactly. As Dagmar just wrote, every couple of months is something we would like to do. So yeah, not every month, but every now and then. Maybe we get a regular schedule of every 3 months or something like that. Because while it is super fun to do, it also just takes time, and we do have our big development to focus on, which I want to show you guys as well, but I can't. So yeah, sorry for that. So yeah, have a wonderful Christmas. Again, thanks for your support. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, have a great new year. And we'll see you in 2023. And given that 2022 wasn't too bad, let's make sure that 2023 is even better. So thanks again, guys, and bye bye. Good night.